Hello everyone and welcome back to some more action from the 38th European Club Cup. We have a third round match between board one Bojan Maksimovic representing chess club Zmaj, which translates to Dragon, and Magnus Carlsen for his club Offerspiel. You guys said that I've been mispronouncing it like it's German. I've been saying Offerspiel, but it's actually Offerspiel, which translates to sacrificial play. So sorry about that. I have no idea why I said Offerspiel, just made sense to me, but I now realize that it completely doesn't. And like I said in the previous video, this kind of a tournament is the only opportunity someone who is, let's say, over 300 rating points lower rated than Magnus will get to actually face the former world champion and the highest rated player in the world, as he usually only plays close tournaments, and these few games a year that he plays for his club Offerspiel are, you know, a great opportunity for lower rated players who are either grandmasters or, in this case, I believe Bojan Maksimovic is an international master. Yeah, it says international master here. So a great opportunity for him, and the opening that Magnus chooses for this game is, well, not out of this world, because it has been played before by some very well-known players. It has even been played against a world champion. So I don't know why Magnus chose it, probably to avoid theory, but also could be other reasons. So let's check it out. Bojan has the white pieces and he opens with e4, and Magnus goes for none other than pawn to a6. Now this is called in chess theory the St. George's defense, but of course we all call it the Tony Miles, because in the European Team Championship of 1980, the great Englishman Tony Miles defeated none other than then world champion Anatoly Karpov with this exact same move. And we have pawn to d4, very principled reply, taking the center as black is playing weird moves, and the Miles played b5 here against Karpov, and b5 was played and Karpov played knight to f3. Nowadays it is known that you should challenge the expansion on the queen side with a4 right away, but okay, pawn to d4, and Magnus goes pawn to e6, and with this move basically transposes into the French defense. We have knight to f3 and pawn to d5, so it's pretty much the same as if you had like e4 e6 d4 d5 and then knight to f3. So pretty weird move order of the French, but probably we should go like a knight b to d2 and c5, and now we get this, like, okay, let's say e4 was played, then e6 the French defense, d4 d5, then the knight defends d4 pawn with knight b to d2, then Magnus plays something like a6, let's say knight f3, and then pawn to c5. So this is one of the possible move orders, and Magnus has played it before. For example, he had this exact same position against Wesley So, only in that game he didn't play knight pawn to c5. In that game he played knight to f6, and the game ended in a draw. It was played in the Norway Blitz Championship of 2023. So okay, d captures on c5, bishop captures, and now bishop to d3. We have knight to c6, castles, and knight to f6. So this is now already a very well-known position. We have queen e2, queen to c7, and now e captures on d5. Knight captures on d5, and knight to e4, now putting pressure on the bishop, so Magnus brings it back. And here, there is a game where bishop to c4 was played. It was played in 1988 between Ilya Smirin and Alexei Dreyev, and Smirin lost this game after bishop to c4. But here we have knight to g3, and it is now already, as of move 11, that we have a completely new game. So Magnus continues development, bishop to d7, c3, and now knight to f4. Going after the bishops here. Now you could capture with this bishop, or you could capture or you could just move the queen and allow Magnus to capture the light square bishop. So which bishop do you keep? Of course, you are playing against the French, you keep the light square bishop. So bishop captures on f4, Magnus recaptures rook a to d1. We have rook to d8, and now rook f to e1. So completing development, Magnus castles, and now queen to c2, putting pressure on Magnus's pawn here. Now you could play g6, you could play h6, you could even play a move like king to h8, but when playing a lower rated opponent, king h8 is not a move you want to make, because someone who is over 300 points lower rated could go for bishop captures on h7, and once you trap the bishop, just give up the bishop for 3 pawns here, and you will have excellent drawing chances. So after queen to c2, g6 right away by Magnus, pawn to h4, and now king to g7. We have pawn to h5, and Magnus just plays bishop to c8. It's a very useful move. It defends the b7 pawn and also offers trades of rooks on the d file. So bishop to e4, preparing to put pressure on that b7 pawn with bishop e4 and queen to b3, and Magnus nicely trades. Rook captures, and now knight to e5, offering further trades. So now you slowly but surely get the idea of what Magnus is trying to do. e2. His pieces are somewhat optimally placed, but the problem of the French light square bishop still exists. And now look at this light square bishop. It's simply a terrible piece. You've seen how a bad bishop can influence your game in the previous game, where Magnus had the white pieces and his light square bishop completely dominated his opponent's light square bishop. But now Magnus will have to fix this. So knight to e2, going after the queen. Knight captures with check, bishop captures, and now queen to e5. A very nice centralizing move. Queen to b3, going after the b7 pawn, and now Magnus plays queen to c7. G3, and now rook to d8, offering a trade of rooks. Magnus wants the rooks of the game, and then he will try to trade off the queen. So rook captures, bishop captures, and now h captures on g6. Whether you should capture here or not, it's really a matter of a personal preference. I would say I would not capture. Some people would capture. I just don't see what you get by capturing, and as long as it's on h5, it's always a very annoying pawn, because black has to calculate every move, whether you will capture or whether you will try to sacrifice with pawn to h6. Could be very annoying. So okay, h captures and g6, h captures, and now knight to f4. So Bojan putting his pieces definitely on very optimal squares, and now pawn to b6 by Magnus. We have queen back to d1, and now queen to d7. Magnus offers a queen trade, which you should definitely avoid, because once the trade happens, then this light square bishop definitely is in the game. And you have a bishop pair against the bishop and the knight, with play being on both sides of the board. And as bishops can travel faster and cover more squares than the knight, the bishop pair will have the upper hand. And it's not like when you have a bishop against a knight, okay, you can definitely play against it, but a bishop pair is a very, very particular beast in chess, and it's never easy. It's like a more powerful queen. So queen to e2, avoiding the queen trade, and now queen to d6, slowly but surely putting the queen to a more central square. Knight to d3, and now bishop to c7. We have knight to b4, attacking a6, and now pawn to a6. And now you have to be careful. If you retreat with knight to d3, bishop a6 just wins the game on the spot. There's no way to defend. If bishop to e4, you can just attack it with f5 and game over. So here, knight to c2 was played, and now bishop to d7. We have knight to e3, and now pawn to b5. Magnus knows, of course, that he has a disadvantage on the queen side. He has 2 pawns against 3, and he wants to blockade the position on the queen side. So a3 and pawn to a4. Now Magnus's a4 pawn is basically controlling these 3 pawns. So king to g2, we have pawn to f5. Now you have to be very careful when making a move like this, but Magnus calculated that his king will be safe. We have queen to c2, and now comes bishop to b6. Now you could go for f4 right away, of course, and you can even open up the white king, but the white king is fairly safe here. Let's say queen d3, and you could even throw in a one check, but that doesn't really do all that much. So instead, Magnus plays bishop to b6. Again, he's optimizing his bishops. We have queen back to e2, and now pawn to e5. Beautiful. Just controlling a whole lot of squares here. Preparing pawn to e4 to trap the light square bishop. So Bojan has to move it either to b7 or maybe to a8. Or you could move the king to f1 sort of to make room for the bishop, but it's going to be a very passive bishop there. So bishop to a8, and now pawn to e4. Now the bishop is kind of stranded on a8, and you should be careful so the black queen doesn't capture it somehow. But this allows the knight to be remaneuvered. Knight to d5, and now bishop to a7. Again, Magnus keeping his bishop pair in the game. Now, the dark square bishop is a magnificent piece. For the moment, the light square bishop, not so much just yet. So Magnus is still fighting to make this bishop a useful piece. That's how big of a problem the light square bishop is in the when you play the French. So if you play the French, and if you ever have an opportunity to trade off your light square bishop for your opponent's light square bishop, you, of course, will very, very gladly do that. And now we have knight to b4. Now here you should consider this advancement of the pawn with pawn to c4, as it just forces Magnus to make a decision. So let's say b captures, queen captures, and if the queens get traded, captures. Okay, it's still a bishop pair against the bishop and knight, but you do have the 2-to-1 advantage on the queen side, and you should be able to hold this. You're going to play something like knight back to c3, have constant pressure on this a4 pawn, and well, you should have excellent drawing chances. But he went for knight to b4, and now Magnus plays bishop to c5. We have bishop to b7. This is basically, as he was very low on time, this is already move 40, so time control has been reached. He was below 5 minutes when he reached time control, so he did gain additional 30 minutes, but Magnus was up on the clock like 30 minutes, so Magnus is now around an hour on the clock, and Bojan has some half an hour on the clock. And I believe this was this series of moves were made in order to avoid making some sort of a drastic change in the position. So he just wants to hold everything, but it's as they say, you're not gonna be able to play against Magnus by doing nothing. So king to h6. Magnus now puts his king on a safer square, and now he's preparing something very special. But I'm not going to tell you what it is. You guys will tell me what it is. So bishop to a8. There's just no useful move Bojan can make. Bishop to e8. Now this is a top class move, and I'm sure you guys already realize why bishop to e8 was played. Now Bojan goes for pawn to c4, and now queen to d4, putting more pressure on this f2 pawn. And here is just there's no move you can make. Let's say you go knight to c2. You try to give up the b2 pawn for maybe some queen to d2 action, and then somehow getting the queen into the game. Of course, Magnus would ignore the b2 pawn. He would just play queen d3. And now look at this. Queen captures, e captures. This is bad situation for the knight. If you go to e3, the bishop will just capture it, and then you advance the pawn to victory. So you're going to have to go knight b4, but now just bishop captures, a captures, and d2. And if you block with bishop to f3, okay, you are guarding this, but now b captures and c4. And once you get the king into the game, c3 ends the game. B captures, and a3 is now unstoppable. So after this queen to d4 move, Bojan made his last stand. He played bishop to d5, but now comes Magnus's idea. If you've been closely following what Magnus did on the couple of moves, you will find this move without a problem. If not, you will need a longer pause the video moment. So feel free to pause the video and try to find the only winning move for Magnus while I give you a couple of seconds. So, for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on finding the true idea behind bishop to e8. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is pawn to g5. This is the move that shatters white's defenses. f4 is now coming, and also bishop to h5 is a huge, huge threat, as it will attack the queen. The queen is stuck here guarding the f2 pawn. There's just no way out of this. So Bojan, of course, finds a way. There is but one. Knight to c6. This keeps him in the game, but queen d3 offers a queen trade, and now he's out of options here, as if you move the queen somewhere weird, then queen b1, and you will start gobbling up the pawns here. So queen captures, e captures, and now king to f1. The problem is if you go knight to e5, just going after the pawn, and d1, bishop to f3, bishop to d4 attacks the knight, and you will start gobbling up the queenside pawns, and then the queenside pawns will decide the game. So here, king to f1, and now b captures on c4. This is also one part of the tactic, as the c4 pawn cannot be captured, the knight on c6 is hanging. So knight to e5, and now pawn to d2. King to e2, now the king also helps out, but now bishop captures on f2. And look at this bishop pair. I mean, the light square bishop still kind of not doing all that much, but the potential of the light square bishop became so impressive, because now you have the pass d pawn, and bishop to h5 check would allow it to queen on the d1 square. So you cannot touch the bishop, otherwise you just promote g4 here. Trying to mess up Magnus's pawn structure, but now bishop to d4, attacking the knight and the pawn here. Knight captures on c4, and now f captures on g4, so giving up this pawn to create a pass pawn on the g file, and now the g1 square is already guarded. King captures on d2, pawn to g3, and now king to d3, attacking the bishop. And now look at this, bishop to f7. Finally, the bishop plays a useful move, although it had great potential for the entire game. Now it's just, this bishop is hanging, and Magnus will, of course, gladly give up both bishops to promote this pawn to a queen. So you cannot move the bishop from this diagonal. Bishop back to g2, now comes bishop to f6. Knight to b6, going after the a4 pawn, and now bishop to b3, defending and creating a wall here against the white king, so the white king cannot defend the b2 pawn. So king to e3, now bishop captures on b2. We have bishop to c6 going for the a4 pawn, and while you could play pawn to g2, sorry, while you could play bishop captures on a3, then you would maybe the a4 pawn would be vulnerable, so Magnus shifts the attention to the a pawn. He now sacrifices the g2 pawn. So first he gave up the d2 pawn, now he gives up the g2 pawn, and then he will create a passed a4 pawn, also with a tactic, with a very nice tactic. Bishop g2, bishop captures on g2. You have to take this. Now bishop captures on a3, and the problem is you cannot defend with bishop to c6 to go after the pawn, because bishop to c5 check wins the knight on b6. So also another unfavorable square for the king. King to d3 was played, but now Magnus is in time. Bishop b2 creates a wall against the white king, and now the pawn is marching forward. Bishop to d5, only way to continue. We have bishop captures, knight captures, and pawn to a3, and he was in this position on move 61 that Bojan Maksimovic resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. And now for those of you who enjoy me finishing the ended positions, I will show you why this is winning. The reason is you have to defend against both of these pawns, and once you king c2, of course you want to keep an eye on the a2 square, but now g4, and after king to b3 you will play g3, and after knight defends you will just bring your king into the game. King to c2, as you really don't have a move here. King f4, knight g2 check. You will play king f3, knight to h4 check, king f2, and now king to b3. You will push this pawn. The knight will have to sacrifice itself for the pawn. And now, okay, if it was a light square bishop, of course this would be a draw, as you could not defend the queening square, but Magnus has a dark square bishop, so it's completely winning. So king to a2, king to f3, king to b3, and now the black king just comes closer. King to d3, king to b3, doesn't really matter. Bishop to c1, king a2, king to c2, and after king to a1, king to b3, king to b2, and now you simply give a check, and if you capture the bishop, you get a queen, and if you play king to a1, of course, bishop to b2 is checkmate. So this is only one way you could finish this, but I'm sure you guys would not have a problem winning this against Magnus himself if needed. That's the game. Very nicely done by both of them. Bojan played a great game, and he handled this provocation by Magnus a6 in the beginning very, very professionally. Like I said, he's not a professional player. He's, I believe, a third-year student of maybe something like engineering. I'm not sure. And, holding Magnus this long in a classical game is just very, very, very impressive. So I'm pretty sure, Bojan is... If he took chess seriously, and if he dedicated more time to chess, I'm pretty sure he could play pretty much against anyone, as this was very, very impressive play against the strongest player possibly who ever lived, Magnus Carlsen. But yeah, Magnus played faster. Bojan had to make some decisions that simply weren't optimal, and here after bishop to d5, Magnus and you guys of course found pawn to g5, and after that it's just a very well played game. But yeah, Magnus played every move, the top engine move pretty much, and that's what it took to take Bojan down. So props to Bojan for holding his own against Magnus here. That's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. A very nice time. We'll see what happens. If you have some other favorites from the European Club Cup, do use hashtag suggestion and I will go over them. I would like to thank Robert Aratun, Dirash Kumar, Kate Ingram, Bernard Omrani, and Mr. Hoodie Guy for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. And sorry about no videos yesterday. My voice really wasn't working, but today it is feeling better. So there you have it. Magnus wins again. Yesterday we had a masterclass, good bishop, bad bishop. And here we have a sort of an opposite masterclass where Magnus plays with the bad bishop. But, if you give it time, your bad bishop will become a good bishop. Or you will give it up for your opponent's useful piece or something. You just don't want to, lose the game before that happens. That's the secret to winning with bad bishops, obviously. So yeah, once again, really hope you enjoyed it. And yeah, thank you all. I will see you soon and have an excellent rest of your day.